the last time we had a Hassa alert, it was me who wound up. But so far, so good. We still have a winning record. Whatever the radar goes off, and there's a Hassa in the air. And guess what? We got one this weekend. And we're going to take full advantage of it. We're going to exploit it. Especially because of all of this love, dare I say public love for this individual. But we have located a ball that won't fly straight, and we're going to take full advantage of it on the NFL Parlay of the Week. Yeah, I said that with a straight face. Hit the thumbs up button, please. If you haven't, subscribe, and it does us wonders, I promise. We're going to tell you all about DraftKings, the 5 for $200. That hasn't gone away by any means. We'll make you some money, easy money. But we got a Hassa to exploit. Now, let's head on over to DK. Right away, I mean, this is not even our parlay. This is the first leg, all right? Now, we build a teaser before we get out of here. Normally, we supersize shit and all. We're just going to build a teaser before we get out. But, you know, I want you to look at what we have created as the first leg of our baseline 3-leg parlay. Patriots win the game. Zach Wilson throws a pick. Mac Jones throws a touchdown. This is as simple as it gets. This is a very easy, basic game script for you out there, okay? And what's going on is the Patriots, like, they're laying 3. It's moved to 3.5. This opened at 3. It opened at the same number it was 3 weeks ago when the Jets lost at home with that same spread. They were getting 3 at home to the Patriots, and they lose. Patriots won a couple of games, give up 20 total points, and they're only laying 3 to open this thing up at home. There is a general belief. Why? Because that's a trap. You want to talk about what a trap is. Trap is the wrong word. It's bait. Let's sprinkle a little bait and see what happens. Oh, my God, the Jets. They've turned a page. Robert Saleh. You see that guy in the sidelines? That guy's business. Zach Wilson isn't that good. And he's not hurt anymore. We pushed that theory on the Odd Shop Fridays, 1 o'clock Eastern, right here on the Odd Shopper channel. Set your alarm notification and all. Lofty, Rasa, and me. We talked to no, this is not that good. And he hasn't been that good. He's 0-3 straight up against the spread versus New England. And in those 3 games, he's barely completed 50% of his passes with a TD to pick ratio of 2-7. Hey, all the changes on offense, you know what hasn't changed? Bill Belichick on defense. All right, there's the Wilson interception that will clearly correlate with the Patriots winning the football game. And again, outright, money line, not covering any 3.5. Here's the thing. Mac Jones in those 3 games, a TD to interception ratio of 4-1. So we like Mac throwing a TD. We like Zach throwing an interception. It sounded better if I didn't screw it up, but who the hell knows? I screw a lot of shit up. It doesn't make any sense. Favored by 3 on the road and 1, favored by the same 3 when this thing opened up. New York, this is what I love. New York is 4-0 straight up against the spread on the road this year, Shanner. Did you know that? It's been over 10 years since they've won on the road in what? New England, yeah. Zach Wilson's going to screw this thing up way more than anything else. Yep. Ridiculous. Just getting a slack here from Ben Raza about some more college action. That's our first leg here, all right? Let's keep it moving. I'm going to look at this game. You cannot play this. I cannot play this at 7, but I can play this at 3. And maybe even 3.5, depending on this. I just want you to see something. This is at -7 and -295. So we're trying to create some.
I wasn't sure if you didn't know who Sergey Spivak was or Adam. Sure.
Yeah, I'm familiar with Adam Scher.
Okay.
He's that Twitter troll. I've gotten that too, and I'm not even 40 yet.
Yeah, I'm good. What is happening, everybody, and welcome to the Stokastic NFL Tournament Strategy Show every Saturday. I'm here joined by Neil Orfield, a Millie Maker winner, and we go through all of our favorite tournament plays across DraftKings and FanDuel for the Sunday main NFL slate. As you guys come in, do us a big favor, like the video and subscribe to the YouTube channel. We're sponsored by Prize Picks today. Neil, what is happening?
Just trying to figure out this MMA thing as we were discussing just before the show. I didn't enter until the last second because I saw it wasn't filling. I entered a few lineups, still not going all in. So I guess I am falling for people were saying on Twitter, everybody's complaining, nobody's going to not play. And then 2 minutes in, I played a few lineups. So just to kind of track, as you kind of talked me into it because of the possibility of things going wrong and getting a free roll being a real possibility on this MMA slate. So that's what's going on.
It shows my overall confidence level and how this will be pulled off, which it can be tricky because if fight times change during the card, which happens from time to time, there's just weirdness that happens. You could run into, and for people who aren't aware, late swap got added to DraftKings MMA. And I do think there's like a 20% chance that DK fucks it up and then they just have to refund the entire slate. And I was like, oh, I should have just, because I did play lighter than normal volume for myself. And I just played 150 lineups in the $5 because I was like, I want to see how the late swap works. And then I realized like, the reason, because I don't know how late swap works, that's why I should have played normal volume because it's going to end up getting fucked up essentially and everything is going to get refunded. But we're here to talk about football, Neil. And I want to know just any kind of overarching general thoughts you have about this slate, something that we do have to point out to the people. The Buffalo-Cleveland game was originally supposed to be played in Buffalo with just crazy torrential snowstorms. It's actually now being played in Detroit in a dome, which has a massive difference in what we'd expect from the output of those players, because a dome, way different than 6-foot snow conditions. So any other kind of general overarching thoughts? Because I think that is an important thing to point out.
I mean, the last I've seen, so maybe there's been an update since I last read about this, but it seemed like there was some possibility that the Buffalo players can't actually get out of Buffalo and that they won't be able to play this game. As of yesterday, there was at least some concern that maybe the Bills wouldn't be able to actually make it to Detroit. I don't know if that has changed since yesterday, but I think there's at least a little bit of concern that game won't happen. Of course, we'll know before tomorrow whether that game is going to remain on the slate. And I haven't seen anything today suggesting it's in jeopardy. So most likely they made it to Detroit. And then other than that, I think the biggest decision point on this slate is going to be Justin Fields. I think once again, he's going to look great in a matchup with Detroit. He has back-to-back 40-plus point games, tanking me back-to-back weeks. Can he do it again against this Falcons defense? It's another great spot for him. So certainly he can. I think I'm still going to be fading a little bit. We currently don't have a ton of ownership going to Justin Fields, but I kind of suspect that just given the past 2 weeks, the ownership is going to come in a little bit higher than we're expecting. And then, of course, if the Bills game doesn't happen, it'll be even higher.
Yeah, and I mean, I think we should actually start by talking about Justin Fields. He is coming off a game where, he just totally broke the slate at the quarterback position. And I actually got really lucky. I had a CSV error last week when I was uploading my lineups, which actually ended up with me having a lot more Justin Fields than I otherwise would have had. But I was also really unsure about what to do about Justin Fields. And I'm still kind of not sure because I think there's a pretty good chance he's going to be the best fantasy quarterback for the rest of the season. And it's because he's getting the workload of running back as well. Like he's averaging right around 15 carries per game. And if you look at his rushing average, I almost think we should be expecting him to average around 100 rushing yards per game the rest of the year. And it's really hard to balance that with the way we typically would go about building lineups because I almost think he breaks a lot of the stacking rules. How are you approaching Justin Fields now?
Yeah, I kind of hate it because, it's something that Alex has over the years. I've kind of gone away from doing naked quarterbacks just because it's so much harder to get everything right if you don't have a stack in place. It's so much easier if you can at least eliminate a few spots with that quarterback. So it really confuses things with Justin Fields. If he's going to keep doing this, where he's putting up, over 30 fantasy points a game, it's going to make it harder to win in GPPs, to be honest, because he has been viable. The Millie Maker last week ran out Justin Fields naked. Still not something that I'm willing to do. I think that if I play Justin Fields, I'm going to continue stacking him. And of course, it wasn't necessary last week. The Millie Maker actually had Travis Kelce in the lineup, and Travis Kelce was outscored by Cole Kmet, who was much cheaper. So it was just kind of happenstance that Justin Fields naked won last week. But yeah, it sort of confuses everything, because now it's like, do I need to stack with Justin Fields if I play him, which I still think that is my preference, to continue stacking with him, just to eliminate the total lotto nature of things. And then also, do I need to have a run back? That's a little bit confusing with a running quarterback. Like with a passing quarterback, generally most of the time you're going to want a run back, because you want them to still be throwing the ball late. But Justin Fields does so much on the ground, it's a little bit more complicated. So I think my approach is going to be, at least this week, because I'm expecting him to come in over that 13%. If he does come in at 13% owned, I think that's totally reasonable. But I think that there's a good chance that he comes in once again closer to like 30%, even with the price coming up. So I think for this week at least, I'm going to continue just watching, with my hand over my eyes and fading Justin Fields, playing, not complete fading, but at least going under the field.
Yeah, and I just looked up his rushing prop. I was kind of curious what it would be for today. And assuming you haven't looked at it, what would you guess is the rushing prop for Justin Fields for this game against the Falcons?
65.
69.5. So pretty good guess by you. And the point being there is, I do feel like I need to get some exposure to him in tournaments. And I also have to make rules where maybe I'm going to play, personally, I'm going to play lineups with Justin Fields naked, just because I think there is a chance that he's going to be a guy who gets 15 carries and averages 6 to 7 yards per carry. And then to think like, all right, well, if he has 150 passing yards, but he rushes for 100 yards and another rushing touchdown, he's still a good play at quarterback, and he's just way different. The thing that we've seen similar, not to say they're the exact same, but Lamar Jackson, the year he won MVP. And that's not to say Justin Fields is an MVP caliber player right now, but he kind of might be for DFS purposes. So Justin Fields, I'm going to run him out in some lineups naked. I'll also be stacking him in some. I think the way I'm going to approach it is, you and I talk about how we set up groups in Fantasy Cruncher. I'm going to be doing, lineups where it's Justin Fields. There's a boost to his pass catchers, Chase Claypool, Cole Kmet, Darnell Mooney. And then if they end up in lineups, which they're going to in some, cool, but they don't have to be in all of my Justin Fields lineups. I think that's the way I'm going to approach it.
And I guess actually, so are you also playing the $20 milli? Is that the contest you're prepping for?
So I am not. I have a bunch of tickets for the Millie Maker. So I know I'm going to be playing some lineups, at least in the Millie Maker, because I have like 20 something tickets for it right now. But I don't know if I'm going to play 150 in it, but I'm going to play at least the tickets I have for it. Okay,
I'm just thinking that I think running Justin Fields out there without any pass catches also makes more sense in smaller field GPPs, and obviously in cash games, but also I think in smaller field GPPs where you don't need to get everything perfect, you don't need to hit the perfect correlations. I think that it's certainly more viable. I'm talking about the Millie Maker particularly, where I would struggle to run him out there naked just because of all of the things you need to get right. But yeah, I mean, as you say, it's certainly, if it's viable for any quarterback, it's certainly viable for Fields.
And then the quarterback so while I like Justin Fields, I'm going to be getting to him. My favorite quarterback to play this weekend is Josh Allen. And I'm kind of curious to see where the ownership lands on him. Right now, it's fairly modest. We have it projected for 11% on DraftKings, 15% on FanDuel, while we have Buffalo with by far the highest top stack odds on the slate. I'm not sure people generally are going to notice how big of a difference it is that he's going to be playing in a dome. Like if Josh Allen played half his home games in a dome, can you imagine the kind of stats that he would put up? Now, I understand there's some concerns with the elbow. He had 3 turnovers last week. One was just a really dumb fumble in the end zone. And then also just 2 interceptions where it does look like sometimes the elbow is an issue and throws might get away from him. Playing in a dome with this offense, though, I think the upside for him is crazy high. And I do think, like you, there's a chance that Justin Fields' ownership comes up by the time we get to tomorrow, and maybe Josh Allen gets forgotten in the mix a little bit. But the team I'm going to be stacking the most this weekend is going to be the Buffalo Bills. What do you make of them and them now playing in Detroit?
Yeah, I mean, if Josh Allen played every game in a dome, he might put up like Justin Fields kind of stats. No, I'm with you 100% on, that was a joke, by the way. I'm with you 100% on Josh Allen. We have him projected for, as you said, 11.4% ownership in the top stack 24.5% of the time. It is just such a huge boost to get to play in Detroit. Again, we're going to have to pay attention to whether the Buffalo players actually make it to Detroit, because that is, I still think, at least a little bit of concern. But yeah, I mean, it's going to look great for Josh Allen in a great matchup with the Browns. They are 26th against the pass in terms of DVOA, 32nd against the rush. Bills have a one of the highest, maybe the highest implied team total on the entire slate, which is obviously to be expected with the Bills. But yeah, it's such a great spot. And obviously there's no real home field advantage for anybody here playing in Detroit. It's a phenomenal spot for the Bills, and they are probably going to be my top stack as well.
Yeah, I'm hoping that people just don't notice what ended up changing with the game. And by the way, also something that I have a bet on this game. I bet the over. So for me, I tried to bet over 42.5, but I ended up getting 43.5. It was moving up as I bet it. And I just think it's one of my favorite football bets I've ever made, just from a standpoint of, hey, this is something that's significantly changed about the conditions, because we're going from weather, terrible snow, now the game being played in a dome. And for all the same reasons I like the over for betting purposes, I like for DFS as well. It is a big boost to that situation with it being played in a dome. Now, those are going to be the two most popular quarterbacks, I presume, this week. Justin Fields, Josh Allen. Personally, Bills are going to be my go-to stack for the weekend. I'm willing to play some of Justin Fields naked. Now, in terms of the next tier of quarterbacks, where we've got guys that are picking up ownership like Dak Prescott, Daniel Jones, Jalen Hurts, your guy Kirk Cousins, these guys are all kind of grouped together, 6 to 8% owned. Who are the next group of quarterbacks that are standing out to you?
Yeah, so I think that actually Marcus Mariota is really interesting from that other side of the Chicago and Falcons game. We've got him coming in at 4.1% ownership. Mariota can also run a good bit. It was brought up yesterday on the contrary. Somebody in chat brought up Marcus Mariota might be benched like by halftime, which is definitely a real possibility. But as Alex pointed out, that's, even if that is true, we're assuming that Justin Fields, if you're playing Marcus Mariota, you're assuming he's having a good game. So if he's playing so poorly that he gets benched at halftime, your lineup's probably not going to get there anyway. So I think Marcus Mariota as a skinny stack in particular probably makes some sense. He does enough on the ground that you don't need to double stack Marcus Mariota, but he's relatively cheap. We have the Falcons being the top value stack 8.3% of the time. So some positive leverage there. Only the top stack 3.8% of the time. So some slight negative leverage there, but then 8.3% chance of being the top value stack. So I like Marcus Mariota a good bit. We've seen Russell Wilson's ownership come up. He was somebody I was planning on bringing up as somebody I like here, up to 6.1% owned. I still think that it's a plausible stack against the Raiders with no Jerry Jeudy. I think it's a little bit easier to know, like, you just want to go to Cortland Sutton and probably Greg Dulcich are the guys you're most likely going to want to stack with there. Kind of like that one. Philadelphia, are they on this slate? Yes, they are. Okay, against Colts. Yes. Yeah. Eagles at Colts. That actually looks pretty interesting. I don't think that I've talked about that much. I don't know why. Maybe I'm just misremembering, but we have 6.5% ownership going to Jalen Hurts, 12% chance of being the top stack. So that actually looks really interesting. I'm just trying to think why we haven't talked about it more so far. I guess it's not the best matchup in the world with the Colts, but that looks really good. I definitely have some interest in Jalen Hurts if he's only going to be 6.5% owned. Once again, I think you can just skinny stack Hurts. He has enough rushing upside that you don't necessarily need to be double stacking him. As you said, my guy Kirk looking pretty good. 6.5% ownership, 9.3% chance for the Vikings to be the top stack. I think that's going to be a game environment with two very good offenses. I think, and Dallas's defense obviously pretty good, but still, I think that's a game that we could see some fireworks with two very good offenses in Minnesota. So I do like Kirk Cousins quite a bit. And then on the other side of it, I think you can play Dak as well. Joe Burrow looks phenomenal. 4.8% projected ownership, 7% chance of being the top stack. No Jamar Chase means you're probably putting T. Higgins in that stack, maybe Tyler Boyd, maybe Hayden Hurst. But I think that's a stack that makes some sense. I feel like I'm listing a lot here. Do you have any commentary on any of these or any that you want to add?
Yeah, so the Marcus Mariota one, it's just going to be tough for me from the standpoint of, it's really hard to project somebody who might not play the entire game, and he's been absolute shit this year. So for me, I'm probably going to avoid the Mariota end of this. By the way, we also got a super chat, so we can hit on that, and then we'll get back to talk about some of these quarterbacks. But Dion's 89 saying that he's going to stack Allen and run a Claypool Pitts mini stack. So Claypool Pitts mini stack, Josh Allen.
So do you mean down D Owens that you're not gonna? You're gonna stack Allen. So you're gonna have Allen stacked with. I think that makes some sense. I mean, mini stacks, a little bit of correlation. Secondary stacks outside of your quarterback stack, I think make a lot of sense. And Claypool is a guy that I don't think we're gonna see a ton of ownership on him in this game. So I think that makes some sense to me.
Yeah, let me look at some of the individual. Kyle Pitts, I mean, we're all tired of Kyle Pitts at this point, but for large field tournaments, I certainly think you can make a case for him. I do think if I'm stacking one person with Justin Fields and I have to pick my favorite stacking partner, it probably is Chase Claypool. I think he's the most talented of any of the pass catchers on the team. He's not going to be popular. And at some point, they traded for him. They gave up draft capital. I think there's going to be an intention to work him in and make him the number one wide receiver. I think ultimately he will be the number one over Darnell Mooney, just a guess based on talent of the two players. And remember, we thought Claypool was going to be that guy in his first year in Pittsburgh. He looked really good his rookie year, kind of fell out of favor. But I do think that in terms of the talent level compared to ownership, I think that Claypool is probably the best stacking target with Fields.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think that is if you're playing Fields, I agree with you. That's people are going to want to pair him with Kmet because he fills up a tight end spot. He had 7 targets last week, and he's just been good the past couple of weeks. So people are going to naturally say, this seems to be working. Let's go back to Fields Kmet. Other people might say, let's pivot to Darnell Mooney. I think that Chase Claypool is going to be a little bit forgotten by the field just because he hasn't done anything since he's been in Chicago. But yeah, I mean, they traded draft picks for him. They clearly want Chase Claypool there, and I do think he's talented. So I think it makes sense if you're playing Justin Fields, maybe stack him a little bit differently than other people and use Chase Claypool in there. But yeah, as D. Owen says, it also makes sense. Even if you're not stacking, you could play some Claypool and Pitts mini stack. I think makes some sense.
Yeah. So looking at some of the other quarterbacks that stand out to me, Kirk Cousins, I think he was somebody that you had mentioned before. I think that him double stacks with Justin Jefferson also just absurd as of late. And I think now, you and I, we don't have our guy Cooper Kupp to go to as our preferred pay up option anymore. The only thing that got us to stop paying up for Cooper Kupp was just his death. Like him getting hurt and no longer playing was the only thing that was going to stop me from playing him. It certainly wasn't going to be Matthew Stafford and whatever left of his corpse. No, with him out, I feel like I'm going to definitely end up gravitating a lot towards Justin Jefferson when I'm building my lineups tomorrow. So that in itself is also going to make Kirk Cousins pop up more for me. And the other one too, Lamar Jackson. With all this talk about Justin Fields and me even saying, like, could he be the next coming of Lamar Jackson? We still have the Lamar Jackson. He has a great matchup against the Carolina Panthers. It's very rare that we see Lamar Jackson with the rushing upside in addition to really high top stack odds. So that's somebody else that I think is being underrepresented. Only 5% ownership for him over on DK, over on FanDuel, 8% ownership for Lamar Jackson. It's funny that we now see Lamar Jackson and Justin Fields fairly comparably priced and the field going way heavier towards Justin Fields. I love Fields. I'm not ready to say he's above Lamar Jackson. That kind of seems like where the field is at, though.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. I think that's a good contrarian pivot to Lamar Jackson against Carolina. 5.6% ownership, 7% chance of being the top stack. Again, I'm probably skinny stacking. I saw on a Wednesday show, some people were talking about him, and then they said, well, if Mark Andrews doesn't play, I'm probably not playing Lamar Jackson. I think you can still play him though, even if Mark Andrews is out, which I think we're actually expecting him back. But even if he were out, I think you could play Isaiah Likely. Obviously, not as good as Mark Andrews, but I still think it's a viable stack with Lamar Jackson and a pass catcher. Even if Mark Andrews, obviously, it helps the stack to have Mark Andrews in there. But even without him, I think that Lamar Jackson is certainly viable. The other spot I sort of have interest in is Jared Goff coming in at 2.3% ownership in a matchup with the Giants. That's a very good matchup. 3.1% chance of being the top stack, 3.9% chance of being the top value stack. It does become harder and harder to play quarterbacks that just don't have rushing upside, as we see so many quarterbacks now that do have that upside for 35 or more fantasy points. Admittedly, it gets harder for me to want to play guys like Jared Goff, but I think that there is scenario where he throws 4 touchdowns and you're gonna really like the salary savings with Jared Goff in this matchup with the Giants. There's obviously also a scenario where he throws 0 touchdowns because he is not an elite quarterback, but I think the value there and the matchup with the Giants, sort of a game environment that I think we could see some fireworks as well.
Yeah, I think that also does make some sense. Daniel Jones, another quarterback who, anytime quarterback's gone up against the Detroit Lions, there's some reason to get there. And also somebody else that has rushing upside at quarterback. Any other contrarian options or anything else you want to bring up at the QB position?
No, I think we have largely talked about all of the interesting quarterbacks. Yeah, as you said, Daniel Jones, another one that sort of falls into that bucket. I guess we're seeing some positive leverage on Derek Carr. I talked about Russell Wilson, but the other side of that, Derek Carr coming in at 2.4% ownership, 4.1% chance of being the top stack. So maybe a little bit of interest in Derek Carr as well. But yeah, I think we've covered all of them pretty well.
Yeah, and if you guys want access to all of the tools that we have over at Stokastic.com that Neil and I are talking about here, not just player projections and ownership projections, but top stacks tool, which teams have the best odds of being the highest scoring team, which teams have the best, or which individual players have the best odds of landing in the optimal lineup. We've got the boom bust tool. You get access to all of that for free for 3 days if you're signing up for the first time, 3-day free trial. But also, we've got a partnership with BetMGM right now, where if you sign up at BetMGM by clicking on the link that we have below, and Mike will be throwing that into the YouTube chat, you get 2 free months of a Stokastic Plus Platinum package. All you have to do is sign up by clicking on that link. And then when you place your first bet and it gets settled for a minimum of $10, you're going to get 2 free months of all the tools we have over at Stokastic.com. But in addition, also, you're going to be getting a risk-free bet of up to $1,000. So if your first bet loses, get refunded with free bets up to $1,000. Let's move on over to the running backs, Neil. And looking at where we're at with ownership at the running back spot, pretty flat this week. Like, there's a lot of guys that are somewhat popular, but nobody that's crazy popular. So over on DraftKings, we have, just to read off a bunch of names, Josh Jacobs, Dameon Pierce, Saquon Barkley, David Montgomery, Joe Mixon, Devin Singletary, Ramondre Stevenson. Those are the most popular running backs, and all of them are projected between 16 and 19% ownership. So it's not, we don't have one of these slates where it's, one of these guys is a crazy good value play above everybody else that's picking up 40% ownership. There's none of that. And then over on FanDuel, the only running back north of 20% ownership is David Montgomery at a suppressed $6,200 price point. So I want to know, what do you make of the running back position this weekend when there's no real chalk? There's a lot of guys that are, somewhat popular. There's not one guy who's way more popular than the rest.
Yeah, I mean, it all looks like pretty good chalk to me. So I think you just got to mix and match with these guys, whoever fits in your lineup, build around your stacks that you like. It was interesting. I had Whistles Go Woo was on the contrary with me and Alex yesterday, and he was saying that he typically his running back field is only about 10 deep. Like, he gets different more so with the wide receivers, because running back, you just really need more volume, which I think is a good point. You really do. You need volume from your running backs. It's a lot harder to break off, to have 8 carries and break off a 70-yarder is just less likely from the running back position than from the wide receiver position. So I think there is some merit to that, to just playing the chalky running backs. I see you smirking. I'm not sure what it's about. I'm sure I'll figure it out eventually. But I think all these guys look good. I mean, Josh Jacobs, the highest owned at 19% ownership, 14.8% chance of being optimal. He has been such a high volume running back in a matchup with the Broncos, who are a little bit of a run funnel. They're third against the pass, 20 against the rush in terms of DVOA. So it's a decent enough spot for Josh Jacobs. I think that ownership makes some sense. Dameon Pierce, I think, probably our highest leverage, positive leverage running back on the slate, 18.9% projected ownership, 29.1% chance of being optimal. He is 6,500. Obviously, those numbers look great. He looks like a guy that you are, going to want to play. It's interesting to me that, because the Commanders' defense is actually pretty good against the rush. They're second against the rush this year. Wait, what was the news on Chase Young? Is he playing? I don't know how much of a difference
He's question. Did you say, who'd you say?
Chase Young.
I believe he is still questionable. Let me check.
Okay, because that could make a little bit of a difference for Dameon Pierce. But either way, he looks great for us.
He is unlikely to play now, so he's going to be out.
Okay, so I think that helps a little bit for Dameon Pierce. Maybe makes that defense a little bit easier for him. Of course, that's not really my specialty, understanding the nuances of defenses and which players impact which offensive players. But it should help at least a little bit with Dameon Pierce in that matchup with the Commanders. And he obviously looks great in the tools. I think not even necessarily factoring that in. Saquon Barkley, obviously, just been such a stud this year. 18% projected ownership, 12.6% chance of being optimal. But still, even with the negative leverage, if you have 8,900 left over and you're not complete chalk everywhere else, it obviously is always going to make some sense to go to Saquon Barkley. He's just one of the few stud running backs that we can play, and he's in a matchup with the Giants. I mean, 24th against the pass, 27th against the rush in terms of DVOA. The Giants have a 24 implied team total. I think also if you are planning to do a Danny Dimes stack, you could do it with Saquon Barkley as part of the stack from the running back position. So yeah, Saquon, obviously great matchup, great player, makes sense. David Montgomery. So we have 17% projected ownership, 21.7% chance of being optimal against the Falcons. Also, I think that it is a leverage spot against some Justin Fields ownership. Now we don't have Justin Fields being all that chalky, but again, I suspect it'll be higher than what we haven't projected for in terms of ownership. So David Montgomery will be a solid leverage spot. And now we have no Khalil Herbert. So presumably that's going to mean more carries for David Montgomery. Again, 17% ownership, 21.7% chance of being optimal. A lot of positive leverage there on David Montgomery. And he's, different price point than a lot of these high owned running backs. So kind of depends on, does he fit in your build? If you're playing Josh Allen, maybe you need to save a little salary and play somebody like a Joe Mixon, David Montgomery.
Yeah.
Man, I'm misspeaking today. All right. Joe Mixon, 17% ownership, 7.9% chance of being optimal. So he looks the worst of these guys in terms of leverage on the field. He has a pretty massive negative leverage there. Still, I think you can go there against the Steelers. They're not a great defense. He's 7,400. So the price tag has come out. He's probably my least favorite of these running backs up here. Devin Singletary, 5,800.
You're also paying a premium for Joe Mixon, which is something that has his optimal rates rating out, pretty poorly. So Joe Mixon was somebody who's basically not been popular, nor has he been good for the entirety of the season. He has one blow up game. His price goes way up and everybody wants to get there. Yeah. I mean, to me, this is the time that I least want to play a guy coming off a game like this, where you're seeing his salary as high as I said it's been all year. So he is, for instance, he is 9,000 on FanDuel. The only running back more expensive this weekend is Saquon Barkley, and we're still seeing a bunch of ownership going to Joe Mixon. Over on DK, where he is, the 6th most expensive running back, and then also really popular. If you weren't playing Joe Mixon prior to his big game, or if you weren't playing him the last slate where he had I don't even remember what his final stat line was. I know it was like the 8th most fantasy points anybody's ever scored from the running back position. But you shouldn't be playing him now. Like your opinion of Joe Mixon should not be changed based on one result. And it's also just such an outlier from the rest of the season. So I'm most likely going to be undercutting the field on him. As far as my favorite pay up option goes, I'm with you. It's I wouldn't say pay up option. My favorite chalky option, it's Dameon Pierce. He's the one I assume I'm going to be getting the most exposure to. He's involved in the run game. He's involved in the pass game for Houston. The matchup against the Commanders should be fairly decent. In terms of contrarian running backs, Neil, is there anybody really low owned that you like for large field tournaments?
Yeah, I mean, it's all relative when we're talking about low ownership. Excuse me. Where's Jamal Williams on here? Because I think I have some interest. Yeah, so we have Jamal Williams at 4.9% projected ownership. We only have him optimal 4% of the time. So actually some negative leverage on Jamal Williams. But I think that part of the issue with projecting Jamal Williams is we do have DeAndre Swift there. And it's just hard to know how much work DeAndre Swift is going to get. He said he's not going to be healthy all year, though. So I'm kind of assuming that Jamal Williams continues to be the lead back. And maybe I have more confidence in that than what we're projecting him for. So I think that I do have some interest in Jamal Williams against a Giants defense that is 23rd against the rush in terms of UUA, 23rd against the pass as well. The Lions have a 21 implied team total, and I think that Jamal Williams is just the lead back in Detroit at this point. So I am going to have some interest in Jamal Williams. Cordarrelle Patterson, really interesting. He just really failed big time on a showdown slate where he was extremely expensive. He was like clearly too expensive, and I was like, I'm going to pay up to be contrarian on Cordarrelle Patterson. I don't even think it was that contrarian.
No, he was like 40% owned.
Yeah, it ended up not being a smart play anyway. But now we have him here, 6,200, relatively cheap. He's 4.4% projected ownership, 8.6% optimal. Sign me up for some of that. I think that was probably an outlier game. The lack of touches for Cordarrelle Patterson in that game. I think that he's going to be the workhorse in general. He's going to be the Atlanta running back who gets more work. So I think I'm going to go to some Cordarrelle Patterson at 6,200 when not much of the field is going to go there. Ezekiel Elliott coming in at 1.7% projected ownership. Wait, what's the latest on Ezekiel? Forgetting what the news.
He is expected to play, and because of the way and by the way, this is just an assumption on my part. It's pretty clear, and I'm not somebody who's in the camp of running backs being all that important. It seems very apparent though that Tony Pollard is quite a bit better than Zeke Elliott, but for whatever reason, the Cowboys, I don't know if it's because they feel that they're pot committed to him because the amount of money that they're paying him or whatever it might be. But it seems to me that if Zeke does indeed end up playing, I still assume he's going to be the starter. Do you as well?
Yeah, I do too. And I mean, it's Jerry Jones. It's coming from the top. I think you might be right that they just do feel pot committed because it's coming straight from the owner every week. No, we go as Zeke goes. Like, he's our guy. And it's like, you just watched Tony Pollard clearly much better. It doesn't make any sense to me. I think everybody is pretty much on the same page that Tony Pollard is generally better than Ezekiel Elliott. But I'm with you. I think that probably if Zeke is playing, he's probably going to be the lead back. He's probably going to continue to get the workload. So we've got him at 1.7% projected ownership, 5.8% chance of being optimal against the Vikings defense, which has just not been good this year. So I think it's a great spot for Zeke. I'm going to have interest there. Probably more so than I think more of the field is going to want to go to Tony Pollard because we all see the same thing. We watch the games. He looks good. If he just has more of an opportunity, Tony Pollard's going to break out, but he's 6,500. He's coming in at 5% ownership with a 2.8% chance of being optimal. So I'd rather go to Zeke than Tony Pollard, assuming they both play. Outside of those guys, maybe I'll play some Antonio Gibson. He's not really that contrarian, coming in at 9.8% projected ownership, but 12.1% chance of being optimal. I think I'm probably going to go there a bit against the Texans defense that is just 31st against the rush this year. Just not a great run defense. So I think that I will have some interest in Antonio Gibson, maybe even Brian Robinson. It's kind of hard to make of what they're doing, but Brian Robinson got a good number of carries in the last game for the Commanders. We've got him at 5% ownership. That he actually has negative leverage in the tools, 3% chance of being optimal. But at 5,300, I want to look up what Brian Robinson's actual carry total was.
If I'm not mistaken, it went up. It went back up last week.
Yeah,
I don't have the exact number off the top of my head, but I do remember that it went up a little bit. While you're looking at
26 carries for Brian Robinson against the Eagles. I think that, if he's going to get anything close to that, I have a lot of interest that he doesn't get targeted. He has 4 total targets on the year. So clearly not used much in the passing game, but 26 carries last game. They seem to want to give him the ball. He only rushed for 3.31 yards per carry. He has not been great at all from that metric, but if they're going to continue giving him volume against a defense like the Texans, it's a great spot.
Yeah, and something else that I'm going to mention about the running back position before we move on, and I agree with everything you said about Brian Robinson, just kind of an overall lineup building type thing. So both of us have said we like David Montgomery. I think he makes a ton of sense also in lineups without Justin Fields, because at least to some extent, these are both players that are going to be dependent on rushing for a touchdown, and they can't both do that on the same play. And I guess he could always catch a touchdown from Justin Fields as well, but it's not like Montgomery's been crazy involved in the passing game as of late. So in lineups that don't have Justin Fields, I view Montgomery as a pretty good leverage play in those scenarios.
Yeah, absolutely. We're on the same page there. Yeah, I think I'd be less inclined to play him in lineups with Justin Fields, because part of the reason I think he's great is that he is leverage on those Fields lineups. We actually saw it come to fruition last week, and it was heartbreaking for me because I had a ton of David Montgomery and 0 Justin Fields with like 20 seconds left in the first half. They gave it. It was 1st and 1 at the goal line. They gave it to David Montgomery. He failed, of course, and then Justin Fields scored the touchdown. So that was heartbreaking for me. But if they're going to at least give him the first crack of the goal line, that's promising.
Anything else you want to talk about at the running back position?
I feel like we covered the running backs that I am most interested in pretty well. I think we can move on.
All right. So once again, if you guys haven't done it, do us a favor, like the video and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Just a couple clicks of the button, and it does us a whole lot of good. So we do appreciate it. Let's talk about wide receiver. And like I mentioned at the top, when we were bringing up, well, I guess before we were talking about Kirk Cousins, and I said that something that stands out to me about this particular slate is that you and I, we don't have Cooper Kupp to pay up for anymore. He's been our go-to guy at the high end. Also, wide receivers have gotten way more expensive on DK. I know that Al Smizzle was tweeting about it the other day, but it's true. We don't have a whole lot of points per dollar value at the wide receiver spot. So we got Justin Jefferson's really expensive. Devontae Adams, Stephon Diggs, A.J. Brown. If you were paying up for one wide receiver this weekend, who'd be your favorite option?
I mean, it's got to be Diggs, right? As much as I love Justin Jefferson, Diggs is 800 cheaper than Justin Jefferson. Now he's going to be playing in a dome that obviously this with the caveat that they have to play the game, but assuming they play the game, it's going to be Stephon Diggs in a dome game against the Browns. 16.7% projected ownership, 25.4% chance of being optimal. He's pretty clearly the number one for me. Do you see it differently?
I don't, especially because we were talking about the top stack odds and how my number one rostered quarterback is going to be Josh Allen. In that same vein, it just makes sense that I'm going to have Stephon Diggs in there for correlation with him. And Jefferson, I'm going to be playing probably more of Jefferson than I have on other weeks as well, just because there is no Cooper Kupp for me to pay up for. But the number one for me, Diggs. I mean, when we've got him ownership 17%, optimal odds 25% as far as DraftKings go, he is the most positively leveraged wide receiver that we have on the entire slate. And then over for FanDuel, pulling up the numbers there and refreshing them as well, it's something, a little different looking, but still he's one of the more under-owned wide receivers on the slate. We have him with 14% ownership, 17% optimal odds. So I love getting to Stephon Diggs. He's more expensive on FanDuel and DraftKings, but I still think it makes a whole lot of sense there. He's my preferred spend up option, and Justin Jefferson number 2.
Yep, I think we are on the same page there. I just want to say Sterling Tice in chat, because Sterling, he's not trolling. He says Robinson has to be the highest owned running back, and I just want to say not even close from what we're seeing. We're only seeing like 5% ownership on Brian Robinson, unless I'm missing a different Robinson here. So not seeing a ton of ownership for a guy who just carried the ball 26 times last week and now has a very good matchup with the Commanders. So if you want to play some Brian Robinson in your GPPs, you have the go ahead there. He's not going to get a ton of ownership. But yeah, Stephon Diggs. I think Justin Jefferson pretty clearly number 2 as well. Just looking at, unless you want to include like Amon-Ra St. Brown in that bucket but he's 7,200. So I don't know if you consider him real pay up, but he's the only other one, I guess, actually T. Higgins. So it would probably be after Stephon Diggs, probably Justin Jefferson, Amon-Ra, and T. Higgins as the guys who I have the most interest in. We have Justin Jefferson coming in at 15.5% ownership, 14% chance of being optimal. Again, I think that game environment is just one that it doesn't necessarily have to be fireworks, but I think that there's at least potential for a Vikings-Cowboys game to put up a lot of points. And if they do, Justin Jefferson's going to be very involved in that. So I like Justin Jefferson quite a bit. Amon-Ra St. Brown is just a very good matchup. I talk about how I like some Jared Goff lineups. And I think just about probably every Jared Goff stack that I do is going to have Amon-Ra St. Brown in it. Part of the reason that I want to play a little bit of Jared Goff is that I already plan on playing a good amount of Amon-Ra St. Brown. So it just makes sense to throw the quarterback in that stack. Amon-Ra just 7,200, 17.7% projected ownership, 18% chance of being in the optimal lineup. So I like some Amon-Ra. T. Higgins, 13.6% projected ownership, 13.9% chance of being optimal. Obviously, no Jamar Chase. We just saw him kind of fail in this situation with no Jamar Chase. He did score a touchdown, but other than that, he was not all that involved. I think that's probably just a fluke. I think that T. Higgins is he could be an alpha on most teams. I think he is a very, very good wide receiver. He certainly can play that number 1 role. He doesn't need Jamar Chase out there like as a decoy or something, or to get rid of coverage. I think that T. Higgins is going to make a lot of sense for me too.
Yeah, we've still been waiting for that. And, football doesn't work exactly the same as basketball, but it does seem like we've seen a lot of these slates as of late where since Jamar Chase got hurt, we've seen the elevated ownership for T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd, at least to this point. We haven't seen it make a massive difference in their production, but I think a lot of that was because Joe Mixon scored all of the touchdown and in all of the fantasy points the last time we saw them play. I do think that also, so to the point, I agree with you about somebody like T. Higgins. I also think he's really good leverage off of Joe Mixon. If you and I are also going to be underweight on Joe Mixon, and we're assuming the Bengals aren't going to get shut out, that's good leverage right there. Playing T. Higgins and hoping that's where the touchdowns go, and it's not another 18 touchdown game from Joe Mixon. Now I want to ask you about one other wide receiver, and to me, I don't know exactly what to do with him because CeeDee Lamb projects really well. He's really good points per dollar play, but he is so popular. He is projected for 24% ownership on DraftKings, by far the most popular wide receiver on the slate. He is almost double the ownership of every other wideout. Over on FanDuel, little more reasonably owned at 18%. What do you make of CeeDee Lamb when he's probably a little bit underpriced with Dak Prescott now healthy and playing better? He's also uh, relative to the other wide receivers who are, more expensive than usual. He's a little bit underpriced, but also there's so much ownership going to CeeDee Lamb. He's our number one most negatively leveraged wide receiver in our boom bust tool. How are you going to handle him in large field tournaments?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to not want to play some CeeDee Lamb in this. We've talked about the game environment a lot with the Vikings against the Cowboys. Potential fireworks there. CeeDee Lamb, yeah, 7,500, just too cheap, but he's coming in at 24% ownership. That's the only downside to CeeDee Lamb, is that he is just getting a ton of ownership. The matchup is good. The price is right. I think everything looks good for CeeDee Lamb, except for that 24% ownership. We have him in the optimal 12.2% of the time. I guess what you can really say about CeeDee Lamb is you need to account for that ownership. So you can play him. If you want to play CeeDee Lamb, obviously you can play CeeDee Lamb. He could put up 2 touchdowns and 120 yards pretty easily. It wouldn't be that shocking. If you do, though, you're going to want to get Contrarian somewhere else in your lineup. Maybe play a Contrarian stack, or just find some Contrarian pieces in your lineup, because he is 24% projected ownership. That's very chalky.
Yeah, and I'm almost certainly going to be underweight to CeeDee Lamb unless something was to drastically change with his ownership. At least how things stand right now, he wouldn't be in 25% of my lineup. So we've covered a lot of the popular wide receivers. I know we've hit on a couple of lesser popular ones, although T. Higgins still picking up ownership. But is there anybody really contrarian at wide out that you're going to like for large field tournaments?
Hang on one second. Sorry, I was just I thought I had misspoken, because I've misspoken several times on this show when I said when I was talking about Brian Robinson. I was like, oh, did I say James? Yeah. So looking back at the receivers, Drake London. I mean, I've talked about playing some Marcus Mariota. I think you could include Drake London in those skinny stacks. We've got him at just 5.7% projected ownership, 10.7% chance of being optimal. So he is coming in at very low ownership. We actually have Kendall Hinton looking pretty good in the tools at 3,600 with no Jerry Jeudy. He's stepping into that, and no KJ Hamler. He's stepping into that number 2 wide receiver role for Denver. Coming in at just 6.7% ownership, even though he's only 3,600 in a very good matchup with the Raiders, 10.6% chance of being optimal. So Kendall Hinton looks pretty great. Nico Collins, people were talking about Nico Collins yesterday in chat on the contrary as somebody that they're interested in. So, I mean, we do see the 8.7% ownership. So he's not all that contrarian, but 10.4% chance of being optimal at 4,100. I have some interest there. Ooh, Wan'Dale Robinson, 2.3% projected ownership. That kind of shocks me. 8.7% chance of being optimal at 4,600.
It's because he's hurt.
Oh, is he?
Okay. Yeah, it's so he didn't. Let me look up the most recent updates on him, but he hasn't been ruled out, but I'm fairly sure he's iffy to play.
Okay.
And that's something where obviously if he's ruled out, the ownership would go down, but there's also just the potential that if he does get ruled in, that something would end up changing. But right now, he's officially listed as questionable. He was limited in practice dealing with a hamstring issue. So that's really the main issue. If he's totally fine to play, I assume the ownership would come up.
Okay. Yeah, you're right about that. I'm sure if he is healthy, he's going to come up above that 2.3%. Okay. I was looking at that and licking my chops for a second, but yeah, the ownership is probably going to be coming up there on Wan'Dale. Noah Brown. I mean, we talked about how chalky CeeDee Lamb is. Noah Brown, direct leverage on CeeDee Lamb, 4.4% projected ownership, 8.3% chance of being optimal. He's only 3,700. He's been pretty involved in that offense. So I'm going to have some interest in Noah Brown. Adam Thielen, who hasn't really done anything all year. So I don't know when it's coming. It seems like every year he has periods of time where he does absolutely nothing, and then he'll score 3 touchdowns in a game. He is 5.2% projected ownership, 6.9% chance of being optimal. But one I really want to talk about is Gabe Davis. So he's 6,300. We've got Gabe Davis coming in at just 5.2% ownership. Now he's playing in that same dome environment. I mean, that's a great spot. We talk about how much we love Diggs. I think that I have interest in Gabe Davis as well. 6.7% chance of being optimal. And man, Gabe Davis can put up some games sometimes. So do you have any interest in Gabe Davis here?
Yes. I mean, in general, I like the Bills offense so much that Gabe Davis, Stephon Diggs, Knox, like I'm pretty sure I'm going to be overweight to every single pass catcher on the team. Okay. I don't think there's a single player you could tell me that's on the Bills that could potentially catch a pass that wouldn't say, yeah, I'm probably going to be overweight to them.
Okay. Yeah. That's, I don't know if that's true for me, but certainly Gabe Davis is a guy that I have a lot of interest in. So you're going to be, is Isaiah McKenzie? Yeah, Isaiah McKenzie, 3.2% ownership, 3.5% chance of being optimal at 4,400. So he makes some sense. Yeah, I'd say that we have largely covered the I'm just scrolling through the names here and
There,
seeing if there's
there,
anybody
there
else I
actually
want
is one thing I wanted to ask you about, because I agree with you on Noah Brown, and I like somebody else, but for basically the same logic, which to me is Michael Gallup, because Gallup is, and I know he's coming back from the torn ACL. He hasn't really quite had any kind of big breakout game this year. I think there's potential for Gallup to get back to form and be that downplay threat that he had been in previous years for the Dallas Cowboys. And he's not picking up ownership either. I hear you on everything you say about Noah Brown. I just lean a little bit more towards Gallup because we have a past where he was a really high-end fantasy wide receiver with boom bust potential. And to me, that's my favorite leverage off of CeeDee Lamb, just because at least I view him as somebody who has more upside than Noah Brown.
Yeah, actually, that's interesting. So I'm looking at just the snap counts for the Cowboys. Michael Gallup actually played more snaps than Noah Brown the last game. So I was thinking that maybe Noah Brown had surpassed Michael Gallup. I was debating actually whether I should bring up Michael Gallup because you're right. He has been a very viable fantasy asset in the past. Even when they had Amari Cooper in town, it was like a trio there with Cooper, Lamb, and Gallup. Were all viable all the time, similar to like the Bengals this year. Now Gallup seems to be maybe passing Noah Brown on the totem pole, getting back into where we expect him to be, the number 2 receiver for the Cowboys. Obviously has some talent. I think Michael Gallup does make some sense. He is getting more ownership than Noah Brown, 4.4% projected ownership to, oh no, never mind. The exact same ownership that we're projecting 4.4% for each of them. So I guess it's the price tag is the reason that Noah Brown probably looks better in the top stack. So Michael Gallup is 5,100. So you don't get quite the price savings there, but yeah, certainly makes sense. If you're projecting him to be taking over that number 2 role, 5,100 in this matchup with the Vikings, it's a very solid spot. So I like that call.
Yeah, which is where I think things are trending. I could be wrong, but I just think that when the Cowboys gave that contract extension to Michael Gallup, that's what they had in mind, was for him to be the number 2 wide receiver and him getting more snaps than Noah Brown last week, but not in some previous weeks. I think it was really just Michael Gallup not being 100% healthy. And now that he has a few games under his belt, I do think going forward, we're going to see him take over that number 2 wide receiver role. So I like him as leverage off of CeeDee Lamb. I like him in large field tournaments. We're sponsored by Prize Picks today. And if you guys haven't signed up at Prize Picks yet, click on the link below because you're going to get up to a $100 bonus on your first deposit. But also, just like the offer out with BetMGM, you get 1 free month of a Stokastic Plus Platinum package when you sign up by clicking on that link below. And if you're in a state that doesn't have legal sports betting, there's a pretty good chance they have Prize Picks. So if you want to have that sort of itch scratch for you, like, I want to bet player props, but there's no DraftKings, there's no FanDuel Sportsbook, there's no BetMGM in my state, Prize Picks probably has you covered. It's prop-based cards that you could play, so you parlay them together, and we have projections for it over at Stokastic.com with different odds for each individual prop to go over under. So check out the projections we have, and make sure when you sign up for the first time, you click on the link below to get 1 free month Stokastic Plus Platinum and up to a $100 bonus on your first deposit. Let's talk about tight ends now, and one thing that's going to make this a little tricky is we don't know exactly what the status is of Mark Andrews. I'm going to double check to make sure there's been no updates either this morning or since we've started the show, because if Mark Andrews is going to be playing, I think he's pretty clearly the top overall tight end on the slate just from a projection standpoint. And right now his ownership is fairly low, but it's because of some of the uncertainty about his injury. So I'm just going to check to make sure that there's been no updates on him. But Mark Andrews, if he's available to play, how high of a priority would he be for you?
Yeah, I mean, Mark Andrews is going to be great if he is playing. I'm going to want to have a good amount of Mark Andrews. We have him coming in at 7.5% projected ownership. Now, again, could be similar where he is just to Wan'Dale Robinson, where he's not getting a ton of ownership in part because he is questionable, and maybe it comes up once we know his status a little bit. But probably my guess is it's not going to be too much higher than this. 7.5% projected ownership. We have him optimal 16.1% of the time, booming 17.4% of the time. And you and I both love the Lamar Jackson stack. I think that for me, the most likely place I would go is Lamar Jackson skinny stack with Mark Andrews. It's probably going to be the most popular Lamar Jackson stack, but it's still not going to be all that popular because Lamar Jackson not projected for a ton of ownership. So yeah, I'm going to be prioritizing Mark Andrews a good bit, assuming he is healthy, and I'll have plenty of Jackson and Andrews stacks, I think. Is it similar for you?
Yeah, the updates on Andrews are really, really vague right now. It seems like he's trending towards playing. That was why I just wanted to check to make sure there weren't any updates. But at least the recent we got is that he took quite a few reps in practice, whatever the hell that is supposed to mean. And then also that Harbaugh said that I think we'll wait until Sunday for sure. So it seems like he's going to be more of a game time decision, but that could work in our favor. If this is one of these scenarios where we don't find out until 40, 30 minutes before the game starts, that could lower Mark Andrews' ownership in large field tournaments. So I'm actually hoping that's what happens. I'm hoping that he plays, he's good to go, and we don't find out until 30 minutes or so before lock. He'll be my most roster tight end in that scenario.
In that scenario, yeah, I'd be all in on Mark Andrews. That would be certainly very interesting for me.
And then as for other tight ends, I think Mark Andrews, I'm going to do whatever I can to jam him in if he's healthy and good to go. But who are the more cost efficient tight ends that you're looking to get to? Because he's really on a pricing tier of his own, by far the most expensive tight end. Who are the less expensive tight ends that you think make for good plays?
Greg Dulcich is going to look great with no Jerry Jeudy. I think that he's probably the number 2 pass catching option for Denver at this point behind Cortland Sutton. It's a great matchup with the Raiders. Greg Dulcich only 3,800. We have him projected for 11.4% ownership, 16.2% chance of being optimal. So yeah, sign me up for some Greg Dulcich. Tyler Higbee, now with no Cooper Kupp, probably takes on an even bigger role than he has for the Rams, contingent on Stafford playing. But I think Stafford is, I think we're seeing that Stafford's going to play. So Higbee, 9% projected ownership, 11.2% chance of being optimal. He's only 4,000, so relatively cheap. We can go back to Kyle Pitts as we've been doing all year. It hasn't really worked out. I think his best game was like 19 fantasy points. So don't love it, but I think that in this matchup with Chicago, Kyle Pitts, 4,400. We have him at 8.9% projected ownership, 13.3% chance of being optimal. I'm probably going to be a sucker and go right back to Kyle Pitts and hope that he can do it in a good matchup with the Bears. I guess you asked me about cost savings, but I gotta bring up my TJ Hawkinson because I'm very TJ Hawkinson. 2 games of the Vikings, 9 and 10 targets. He is 5,300, so the price tag he's not really saving costs other than Mark Andrews. I think he's the second most expensive tight end on the slate. But I just got to say, man, if he's going to get that kind of volume from Kirk Cousins in this offense, TJ Hawkinson might be a stud. I think that there is a chance that TJ Hawkinson just turns into a fantasy stud. And if he does, this 5,300 price tag could be going up in future weeks. So in a pretty solid matchup, I guess not the best matchup in the world with Dallas, but in a game that I think has potential for fireworks, I have some interest in TJ Hawkinson. Do you think that's somebody you're going to play at all?
Yeah, more so if Mark Andrews is out and I don't really have another tight end to pay up for, then Hawkinson, I think kind of by default would be the guy who it's like, oh, if I'm playing value at other positions and I could spend up, Hawkinson would fill that role by default. For me, the ones that I assume I'm going to have the most exposure to, it is Mark Andrews at the high end, assuming he's good to go. Dawson Knox, just everything else I've said about the Buffalo Bills, Stephon Diggs, Gabe Davis, Josh Allen, Dawson Knox. I love getting to Buffalo now that they're playing in a dome. So Dawson Knox is somebody who, if you're making double stacks of Buffalo, he's just going to pop up in a ton of those in optimizers because other players are so expensive. And him at $3,200 on DraftKings, a little bit cheaper on FanDuel as well. He's one of the only players at his position that's really cheap that enables us to pay up for other bills. So I assume I'm going to end up with a lot of Dawson Knox. And then one, if I'm going really contrarian, somebody who's of interest to me, Logan Thomas, coming into the year and in previous years, we've thought of him as a really high upside tight end and just been hurt a lot this year, but he has been healthy the last couple of weeks. He's running more routes. He's on the field more often. So I think Logan Thomas is a good buy low right now when he's cheap and people aren't really rostering him.
Yeah, no, I like that call. I just need to assert in chat that I will be voting for EMAC for president, not myself. Logan Thomas certainly is somebody that I am going to have some interest in. It's really interesting because you're right. People aren't going to go to Logan Thomas. He hasn't shown us anything this year, but they did target him a few times in the last game, and great matchup with the Texans. Would we be shocked to see Logan Thomas score 2 touchdowns in this game? I don't think so. I think that is certainly in play here, more so than, a lot of tight ends. I think it'd be less shocking than some other tight ends on the slate. So I think that's a really interesting call that I had not thought of previously, but 3.7% ownership, 5.2% chance of being optimal. Definitely interesting there. I mentioned Hayden Hurst as somebody that you can play in Joe Burrow stacks. I think he looks good. 6.3% ownership, 8.3% chance of being optimal. One more that I wanted to ask you your thoughts on. So Mark Andrews, what about if things go the other way? Would you have any interest in Isaiah Likely, especially if the news comes kind of late that, Mark Andrews can't play? Isaiah Likely is only 3,600. Do you think you'd go there at all?
Absolutely. And I mean, we've seen him play, not the Mark Andrews role or anything, but he's played a discounted version of the Mark Andrews role. He, I assume, wouldn't be popular in that kind of scenario and bring up some of his target numbers. I remember he had a touchdown in the showdown contest the other day when I think that was the second game that Mark Andrews is out, if I'm not mistaken. But still, I mean, you look at the potential for targets for him. So last 2 games, he caught a touchdown in each of them. I know he only had 1 reception in the game against Saints, but he was targeted 5 times. The game before against the Buccaneers, he was targeted 7 times. So 2 games, 12 targets, relatively cheap price point. Yeah, it's definitely something that would be of interest to me. But once again, only if Andrews was out.
Yep. Yeah. So it's either or kind of for us for those Baltimore tight ends. Obviously, you're going to have more interest in Andrews if he's the guy, but I would have some interest in Isaiah Likely at very little ownership too. And I still might stick with Lamar Jackson's stack with Isaiah Likely as the tight end. I think is also pretty interesting. So just wanted to hear your thoughts there. I think that we've largely covered the most interesting tight ends. Anybody else you want to talk about?
No, but we did get a news update. So we're about to do our favorite stack of the slate. So if you guys haven't watched the show before, Neil and I close it out by saying if we're building one lineup in a large field GPP, and then we give out what our stack would be in that lineup. But we also got news here. Zeke Elliott officially will play for week 11. So it remains to be seen. I assume he starts. I assume that he's probably going to be in somewhat of a timeshare with Tony Pollard, but just given the way the Cowboys run their offense, I'm going to think that Zeke sees more touches than Tony Pollard unless we see it reported differently. Let's talk about our favorite stack, Neil. If you're building one lineup in a large field GPP, what quarterback would you go to, and who would be the pass catchers in that lineup?
I mean, I feel like I need to leave Buffalo to you. I think that we both love Buffalo. I think Buffalo is probably the top stack, but I'll go somewhere else. I'm going to find a contrarian stack that I like just as much.
While you're doing, I'm just going to spoil it right now. My answer, it's Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, Dawson Knox. Allen's going to be my most rostered quarterback. Diggs is going to be my most rostered wide receiver. And Knox, depending on what happens with Mark Andrews, is either going to be my first or second most rostered tight end. So for me, pretty easily. And that is what is definitely going to encapsulate what's in a lot of my lineups.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I'm torn between between Jalen Hurts and Lamar Jackson. I think that, running quarterbacks just interest me so much. And in both cases, I would be going to a skinny stack. I think just because I like the receiving option better, I think I'm going to go to Lamar Jackson with whoever his starting tight end. I think that is going to be my top stack here. I also, one thing I noticed, Devontae Parker actually looked really good in our tools, and so did Hunter Henry. Both had positive leverage in our tools, particularly Devontae Adams. So that makes me think, should I be thinking a little bit about Mac Jones stacks? I think that he actually came up on the contrary yesterday as somebody you could play against the Jets. 2.6% ownership on Mac Jones, 4.5% chance of being the top stack. It's just such a cheap stack that I think it makes some sense. Just want to throw that out there as one more stack that we didn't talk about that maybe there's a little bit of reason to play that.
All right. So that is going to do it for us this week, guys. Thank you very much for watching. If you did not do it yet, like the video and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Enjoy the football games this weekend, and good luck.